Hi, I'm Suzanne Smith-Jablonski, and I'm pleased to serve as the Executive Director for the Tompkins County Public Library Foundation. Our Library Foundation sustains and strengthens our public library by inspiring community support. We serve as a bridge between the library and the community, encouraging participation and philanthropy. And I can't think of any activity that we do that more embodies our mission than our readathon. I'm so glad that you could be with us here today to enjoy the 2021 readathon. But before we do, I wanted to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the fact that all of us here in Tompkins County, whether at the library, at our home, our offices, or elsewhere, are standing and sitting and residing on Cayuga Nation land. The Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy, founded in the 12th century, have been and continue to be stewards of this land, for which we are grateful. Thank you to all that have come before us to allow us to be able to today celebrate the freedom to read and to celebrate supporting the continuation of that freedom here today. This year we celebrate our 9th annual readathon. This event was started to take our message to the streets, if you will. We wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for library lovers from throughout the community to come and read aloud selections of their own choosing as a way of encouraging their friends and family to support the public library, but also to remind us of the importance of continuing to protect the freedom to read. You may be surprised to hear that every year books are still being challenged in public libraries and school libraries and other places where people believe that the freedom to read should be curtailed based on their own preferences and interests in what is and isn't allowable to read. So it remains very important for us to provide this platform for our reader fundraisers to pick selections of their own choosing, whether it's something they've written themselves, historical documents, fiction, nonfiction, public addresses, creative endeavors, poetry, works in languages other than English, you name it. People have over the years chosen to read those selections as part of the readathon, and taken together they represent just the wonderful mosaic of the written word being spoken aloud, and reminds us of the amazing adventures that you can find here at the public library in the collections. We're so pleased that the funds raised through the readathon are used to sustain and strengthen the library's collections, so that everything that a user could want to find here in the library's books and audiobooks and other wonderful materials, they can do so. So without further ado, I'm delighted to present to you this year's 2021 readathon, and thank you again for joining us today.
Hello, my name is Susan Currie, and I am currently the library director. I'm acting on an interim basis right now. Very honored to be asked to come back. I was the library director here from 2009 to 2017, but I've been a librarian for many years at Cornell University and then at Binghamton. Being director of Tompkins County Public Library was the best job I've ever had. It was absolutely life transforming. The staff here are phenomenal. The services and materials they provide are first rate. Our community is very lucky to have this library. I'm very proud to work with all of the people who have continued to provide such creative services during the pandemic, and I thank them. I'm delighted to read in the readathon this year, and I will be reading from my memoir. I wrote a memoir about my time in a very specialized children's hospital. At one time in the US, they were everywhere. They were called preventoriums, as in prevent, for children who were sickly. I was there for 18 months. I was at the preventorium in McGee, Mississippi. And just as a little bit of trivia, if you've ever been to the Cayuga Nature Center here, just outside of Ithaca, that actually was a preventorium for this area in the mid part of the 20th century. So you can find more about that at the History Center, actually. So I'm going to read a chapter from my experiences at the preventorium in McGee, Mississippi. One afternoon at the preventorium, after Myrtis and I had been best friends for just a little while, during a nap time when neither of us were sleepy, I convinced her to join me in the ultimate adventure, finding the director's closet. This was an example of Myrtis's devotion to me. She followed me blindly and without question. Now, I was obsessed with the director's clothing and shoes, especially since she was one of the few people at the preventorium who wore something other than a uniform. As director, she was very busy. We did not see her often except dinner and the time she joined us in the circle room to teach us a new hymn. She was very elegant, with a perfectly upswept hairstyle and jewelry, usually pearls. She dressed in tailored, belted shirt dresses or beautifully cut fitted suits. I loved her shoes the most. High heels, pumps, wedge sandals in summer, all matched to her outfit. Every morning, I held my breath, waiting to see what the director was wearing. Sometimes it was a freshly pressed, deep navy blue shirt dress with a crisp cape-style collar and 3/4 length sleeves, tightly belted at the waist, and with a full gathered tea-length skirt. Sometimes it was a smartly cut pearl gray suit, buttoned-up jacket with a white Peter Pan collared blouse peeking out, a slim pencil skirt with a kick pleat in the back, and black patent leather pumps with kitten heels. I was convinced that her closet must be a wonderland of gorgeous, stylish clothes and shoes. I was starved for fashion. I missed watching my mother's meticulous routine every morning, getting ready for work as she picked out her outfit and shoes to match. I loved the sound of her high heels clicking on our tile floors, sounding so sharp and sophisticated. I was enchanted by watching her get into the car. She would sit sideways on the driver's side of the seat and swing her legs, knees held closely together, around and under the steering wheel. I liked watching her shoes swing around to the pedals. She told me, "This is the proper way for a lady to get into a car." In those days, all ladies wore, or at least carried with them, a pair of gloves. I loved watching my mother choose each day among the many pairs of beige, navy, white, and black gloves. And she often wore small hats to work, but she always wore a fancy hat for church. Her Sunday hats were not ostentatious, but usually tastefully small, with a short veil and perhaps a silk flower or a few tiny feathers. Watching her, I could not wait until I was a grown-up and could wear elegant hats, high heels, and gloves. I understood fashion even at a young age, and I knew that I must see the closet of wonders, the director's closet. While I reveled in the freedom of our bloomers, I missed the variety of clothes women wore. I missed going to church and seeing the pretty dresses classmates were wearing in Sunday school, and the funny hats that ladies wore in church, some with wide brims and huge feathers that sometimes bumped against family members' heads as they all sat down together in the pew. I missed wearing my petticoats, and the time that I stood in front of the church for a children's program, proudly pulled my skirt up to my waist to show my red petticoat. The stairway leading to the director's apartment was closest to the girls' ward, so we caught glimpses of her going and coming during the day. Over my time there, I felt a wild ambition bloom and grow within me, my heart beating hard each morning as I watched the director descend the stairway from her apartment. First the shoes, then the clothes, and finally the director herself, poised, with her hand lightly resting on the banister as she tapped her way down. This day, I knew I could wait no longer. I must see the director's clothes closet. Everyone was moving about sleepily just after nap time. The two nurses were guiding little girls to the bathrooms and talking to each other while not paying much attention to anything else. The daily routines blurred attention as every day was exactly the same at the preventorium. I quickly pulled Murtis along with me, ignoring her whimpers of fear. We reached the steps. I motioned for Murtis to bend down and crawl up the stairs on hands and knees. I no longer remember why I thought this was the stealthiest choice. We perhaps thought that being so low to the ground would protect us from being seen. We crawled up as quickly as we could, keeping close to the wall. No one saw us. Still crawling, we discovered the door to her apartment slightly ajar so that we could catch a glimpse into the apartment. My heart beat rapidly and I paused, wanting to experience the intense pulsing beat in my ears and veins. Was this freedom and adventure with feelings so close to fear? The rest of the apartment appeared as a blur to me as we went in. Still on our hands and knees, it was only the closet that I wanted, which I saw in a room off to our right. I carefully pushed the door open. Still crawling, we went into the bedroom. It was an incredibly feminine, beautiful room with a pink, peony-flowered quilted bedspread, dust ruffle, and curtains to match. The closet had a bright white louvered door that was open just a tiny crack. I reached the closet door and pushed it open wider and sat back on my legs and feet and looked inside. There it was, hanger after hanger of dresses of all kinds. Suits, shirt dresses, slim belted sheath dresses, in all manner of pattern and colors. There were shoe racks with perfect high heel pumps, sandals. There was even a pair of penny loafers with the penny in the little slot over the toe. All matched together, the toes of each shoe pointing up on its individual rack. I had barely had a chance to gasp over the beautiful shoes and no chance to really study the variety of clothes hanging there when Murtis pulled on my arm. "We have to leave. I hear someone coming." She was fearful. So we quickly backed out of the closet and out of the apartment, still on our hands and knees, crawled into the hall and made our way down the stairway. No one was there. We sat on the bottom stair, breathing hard. Our hands and knees were quite dirty. We could not have been very long in the apartment, perhaps 10 minutes. Back in the ward, little girls were still milling about, opening their lockers, lining up for personal hygiene, which is what they called going to the bathroom at the preventorium. The nurses were walking near the back of the ward. We could hardly believe our luck. By some miracle, no one had seen us. We had had a secret adventure. We slipped into the group and lined up with the other girls. I had taken a mental snapshot of all that I had just seen. Knowing I had only seconds to do so, I had instinctively memorized those clothes and shoes. And perhaps I invented some as well. Throughout my time at the preventorium, I often thought about that closet, cataloging clothing patterns and designs, counting different styles of shoes, often while trying to fall asleep. I thought of it as a secret world of pretty things right above our heads. And I continued to check the director's shoes every single day. I was waiting to see her wear the penny loafers, but she never did. When we were in the playground, Murtis and I often recited to each other what we had seen, the kinds of shoes and dresses. "Skirts with pleats," I would shout. "Checks and plaids," Murtis would shout back. But Murtis would have recited anything I requested. She was a dear, sweet, obedient, and humble girl.
Hi there, my name is Recchia. Welcome to the Readathon. This will be my 9th time performing at the Readathon. And this year I thought I'd do something fun, something a little unusual. Gonna read latest book by J.K. Rowling, and I've kind of, as you can see, I've dressed up for it, and I have some nice music going in the background. So sit back and enjoy as I read you the latest by J.K. Rowling. It's called The Ichabod. And don't I look handsome today? Ha 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 ha. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1, King Fred the Fearless. Once upon a time, there was a tiny country called Cornucopia, which had been ruled for centuries by a long line of fair-haired kings. The king at the time of which I write was called King Fred the Fearless. He had announced, the Fearless himself on the morning of his coronation, partly because it sounded nice with Fred, but also because he'd once managed to catch and kill a wasp all by himself, if you didn't count 5 footmen and the boot boy, and I'm just going to keep the mustache off for the rest of this. King Fred the Fearless came to the throne on a huge wave of popularity. He had lovely yellow curls, a fine sweeping mustache, and looked magnificent in the tight breeches, velvet doublets, and ruffled shirts that rich men wore at the time. Fred was said to be generous, smiled, and waved whenever anyone caught sight of him, and looked awfully handsome in the portraits that were distributed throughout the kingdom to be hung in town halls. The people of Cornucopia were most happy with their new king, and many thought he'd end up being even better at his job than his father, Richard the Righteous, whose teeth, though nobody had liked to mention it at the time, were rather crooked. King Fred was secretly relieved to find out how easy it was to rule Cornucopia. In fact, the country seemed to run itself. Nearly everybody had lots of food, the merchants made pots of gold, and Fred's advisors took care of any little problem that arose. All that was left for Fred to do was beam at his subjects whenever he went out in his carriage and go hunting 5 times a week with his 2 best friends, Lord Spittleworth and Lord Flapoon. Spittleworth and Flapoon had large estates of their own in the country, but they found it much cheaper and more amusing to live at the palace with the king, eating his food, hunting his stags, and making sure that the king didn't get too fond of any of the beautiful ladies at court. They had no wish to see Fred married, because a queen might spoil all their fun. For a time, Fred had seemed to rather like Lady Islanda, who was as dark and beautiful as Fred was fair and handsome. But Spittleworth had persuaded Fred that she was far too serious and bookish for the country to love her as queen. Fred didn't know that Lord Spittleworth had a grudge against Lady Islanda. He'd once asked her to marry him, but she'd turned him down. Lord Spittleworth was very thin, cunning, and clever. His friend Flapoon was ruddy-faced and so enormous that it required 6 men to heave him onto his massive chestnut horse. Though not as clever as Spittleworth, Flapoon was still far sharper than the king. Both lords were expert at flattery and pretending to be astonished by how good Fred was at everything from riding to tiddlywinks. If Spittleworth had a particular talent, it was persuading the king to do things that suited Spittleworth, and if Flapoon had a gift, it was for convincing the king that nobody on earth was as loyal to the king as his 2 best friends. Fred thought Spittleworth and Flapoon were jolly good chaps. They urged him to hold fancy parties, elaborate picnics, and sumptuous buffets and banquets because Cornucopia was famous, far beyond its borders, for its food. Each of the cities was known for a different kind, and each was the very best in the world. The capital of Cornucopia, Chewsville, lay in the south of the country and was surrounded by acres of orchids, fields of shimmering golden wheat, and emerald green grass on which pure white dairy cows grazed. The cream, flour, and fruit produced by the farmers here was then given to the exceptional bakers of Chewsville who made pastries. Think, if you please, of the most delicious cake or cookie you had ever tasted. Well, let me tell you, they'd have been downright ashamed to serve that in Chewsville, unless a grown man's eyes filled with tears of pleasure as he bit into a Chewsville pastry It was deemed a failure and never made again. The bakery windows of Chewsville were piled high with delicacies such as Maiden's Dreams, Fairy's Cradles, and most famous of all, Hopes of Heaven, which were so exquisitely, painfully delicious that they were saved for special occasions, and everybody cried for joy as they ate them. King Porphyrio of neighboring Pluritania had already sent King Fred a letter offering them the choice of any of his daughter's hands in marriage in exchange for a lifetime supply of Hopes of Heaven. But Spittleworth had advised Fred to laugh in the Pluritanian's ambassador's face. "His daughters are nowhere near pretty enough to exchange for Hopes of Heaven, sire," said Spittleworth. In the north of Chewsville lay more green fields and clear, sparkling rivers, where jet-black cows and happy pink pigs were raised. These, in turn, served the twin cities of Curresburg and Barronstown, which were separated from each other by an arching stone bridge over the main river of Cornucopia, the Fluma, where brightly colored barges bore goods from one end of the kingdom to another. Curresburg was famous for its cheeses, huge white wheels, dense orange cannonballs, big crumbly blue-veined barrels, and little baby cream cheeses smoother than velvet. Barronstown was celebrated for its smoked and honey-roasted hams, its sides of bacon, its spicy sausages, its melting beefsteaks, and its venison pies. The savory fumes rising from the chimneys of the red brick Barronstown stoves mingled with the odorous tang wafting from the doorways of the Curresburg cheesemongers, and for 40 miles all around, it was impossible not to salivate breathing in the delicious air. A few hours north of Curresburg and Barronstown, you came upon acres of vineyards bearing grapes as large as eggs, each of them ripe and sweet and juicy. Journey onward for the rest of the day, and you reached the granite city of Jeroboam, famous for its wines. They said of the Jeroboam air that you could get tipsy simply walking its streets. The best vintages changed hands for thousands upon thousands of gold coins, and the Jeroboam wine merchants were some of the richest men in the kingdom. But a little north of Jeroboam, a strange thing happened. It was as though the magically rich land of Cornucopia had exhausted itself by producing the best grass, the best fruit, and the best wheat in the world. Right at the northern tip came the place known as the marshlands, and the only thing that grew there were tasteless, rubbery mushrooms and thin, dry grass, only good enough to feed a few mangy sheep. The marshlanders who tended the sheep didn't have the sleek, well-rounded, well-dressed appearance of the citizens of Jeroboam, Barronstown, Curresburg, or Chewsville. They were gaunt and ragged. Their poorly nourished sheep never fetched very good prices, either in Cornucopia or abroad, so very few marshlanders ever got to taste the delights of Cornucopia wine, cheese, beef, or pastries. The most common dish in the marshlands was a greasy mutton broth made of those sheep who were too old to sell. The rest of Cornucopia found the marshlanders an odd bunch. Such dirty and ill-tempered, they had rough voices which the other cornucopias imitated, making them sound like hoarse old sheep. Jokes were made about their manners and their simplicity. As far as the rest of Cornucopia was concerned, the only memorable thing that ever came out of the marshlands was the legend of the Ichabod. Chapter 2, the Ichabod. The legend of the Ichabod had been passed down by generations of marshlanders and spread by word of mouth all the way to Chewsville. Nowadays, everybody knew the story. Naturally, as with all legends, it changed a little depending on who was telling it. However, every story agreed that a monster lived at the very northernmost tip of the country in a wide patch of dark and often misty marsh too dangerous for humans to enter. The monster was said to eat children and sheep. Sometimes it even carried off grown men and women who strayed too close to the marsh at night. The habits and appearances of the Ichabod changed depending on who was describing it. Some made it snake-like, others dangerous or wolf-like. Some say it roared, others that it hissed, and still others said it was drifted as silently as the mist that descended upon the marsh without warning. The Ichabod, they said, had extraordinary powers. It could imitate the human voice to lure travelers into its clutches. If you tried to kill it, it would mend magically or else split into two Ichabods. It could fly, spurt fire, shoot poison. The Ichabod's powers were as great as the imagination of the teller. Mind you don't leave the garden while I'm working, parents all over the kingdom would tell their children, or the Ichabod will catch you and eat you all up. And throughout the land, boys and girls played at fighting the Ichabod, tried to frighten one another with the tale of the Ichabod, and even, if the story became too convincing, had nightmares about the Ichabod. Bert Beamish was one such little boy. When a family called the Dovetails over for dinner one night, Mr. Dovetail entertained everybody with what he claimed was the latest news of the Ichabod. That night, 5-year-old Bert woke, sobbing and terrified, from a dream in which the monster's huge white eyes were gleaming at him across the foggy marsh into which he was slowly sinking. There, whispered his mother, who tiptoed into his room with a candle and now rocked him backwards and forwards in her lap. There is no Ichabod, Bertie. It's just a silly story. But Mr. Dovetail said sheep have gone missing, hiccuped Bert. So they have, said Mrs. Beamish, but not because a monster took them. Sheep are foolish creatures. They wander off and get lost in the marsh. But Mr. Dovetail said people disappear too. Only people who are silly enough to stray into the marsh at night, said Mrs. Beamish. Hush now, Bertie. There is no monster. But Mr. Dovetail said people heard voices outside their windows, and in the morning their chickens were gone. Mrs. Beamish couldn't help but laugh. The voices they heard are ordinary thieves, Bertie. Up in the marshlands, they pilfer from one another all the time. It's easier to blame the Ichabod to admit their neighbors are stealing from them. Stealing? Gasped Bert, sitting up in his mother's lap and gazing at her solemn eyes. Stealing very naughty, isn't it, Mommy? It's very naughty indeed, said Mrs. Beamish, lifting up Bert, placing him tenderly back into his warm bed and tucking him in. But luckily, we don't live near those lawless marshlanders. She picked up her candle and tiptoed toward the bedroom door. Night, night, she whispered from the doorway. She'd normally have added, don't let the Ichabod bite, which was what parents across Cornucopia said to the children at bedtime. But instead she said, sleep tight. Bert fell asleep again and saw no more monsters in his dreams. And that's where I'm going to end it. I realize that's a little bit short of the 15 minutes, but there you go. The Ichabod, as read by Rich Recchia, dressing up as King Fred the Fearless. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Raul Palma. I'm an assistant professor at Ithaca College in the Department of Writing. And this is...
I'm Olivia Palma, and I go to school at Elizabeth Ann Clune Montessori School.
That's right. And why are we supporting the library, Olive?
Because we love the library and we love books.
Yes, we do. So today we're going to be reading from Family Pictures, Cuadros de Familia, by Carmen Lomas Garza. And we'd like to tell you a little bit about Carmen Lomas Garza before we begin reading. So here we are at the end of the book. So Carmen Lomas Garza is one of the most prominent Mexican-American painters working today. Born and raised in Texas, she now lives in San Francisco, California. Her paintings have traveled all over the United States and Mexico in numerous exhibitions. In making the paintings you see in this book, she used a variety of materials, including one that you and I have been experimenting with lately.
Exactly, and it's right there.
That's right, the oil on canvas, even though
And also 2 more over
We really
there.
don't know what we're doing when we do it, but it's been fun.
It has. The pictures in this book are painted from my memories of growing up in Kingsville, Texas, near the border with Mexico. From the time I was young girl, I was always dreamed of becoming an artist. I practiced drawing every day. I studied art in school, and finally I did become an artist. My family has inspired me and encouraged me for all these years. This is my book of family pictures.
Beautiful, Olive. Thank you for reading that.
You're welcome.
So we're going to begin by sharing with you all the first painting of many. So we'll be going through 4 today. We don't have time to go through all of them. But this painting is called For Dinner. And Olivia, why did you choose this one?
Because I like the boy's expression.
Which way? Oh, there you go. And what's he doing?
He's dropping his snow cone because he sees the grandma that's killing the chicken.
That's right. I love this picture because it reminds me of my own grandmother, Mima, and one very, very memorable and maybe infamous Thanksgiving dinner. So we'll read a little bit for this painting.
This is my grandparents' backyard. My grandmother is killing a chicken for dinner. My grandfather is in the chicken coop trying to catch another chicken for my family. Later, my family will sit down to eat Sunday dinner's chicken soup. That's me in the blue dress with my younger brother Arturo.
That's right, Arturo.
He was so surprised by the scene that he started to drop his snow cone. We had never seen anything like that before. I knew my grandparents had always raised chickens, but I never knew how the chickens got to be soup.
Mm-mm. And I'll now read this in Spanish. God help us all. Para la cena. Este es el patio de mis abuelos. Mi abuela está matando una gallina para la cena. Mi abuelo está en el gallinero, tratando de atrapar otra gallina. Más tarde mi familia se sentará a comer la cena el domingo. Sopa de pollo. Esa vestida de azul soy yo, con mi hermano menor Arturo. Él se sorprendió tanto con lo que vio que empezó a dejar caer la raspa. Nunca habíamos visto algo parecido. Yo sabía que mis abuelos criaban gallinas, pero jamás había sabido cómo era que las gallinas se convertían en sopa. And once again, that's the photo
Picture
there.
of
It's amazing that this is oil on canvas.
It's true because it doesn't look like it's oil on camera, but it is.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move now to the next picture, or the next painting. And this one is going to move us to a completely different area. It is titled Hammerhead Shark, or Tiburón Martillo.
And I'll go first.
And actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose this one?
Well, I love the colors. I like the ocean, and I love how the shark. I like the detail of how it looks like there's blood right there.
That's right. That's very. It's such a bright red there. It
makes it look like blood.
I love the ocean, the brush strokes. Right, it's kind of like this blue and green that just blends into the sand a little bit.
And I like it a lot.
It
It
makes
kind of looks like a real beach.
It makes me want to go to the beach. Maybe not one with a shark on it.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's read a little
Maybe
bit.
a lake.
Well,
Would be more better.
that you can count on.
Yeah, because there's no sharks in the lake. At least that I don't know of. Hammerhead shark. This picture is about the pastime of my family went to the
Now it's Padre Island.
in the Gulf of Mexico to go swimming. Once when we got there, a fisherman had just caught a big hammerhead shark. At the end of the pier, how he got the shark to the beach, I never found out. It was scary to see because it was big enough to swallow a little kid whole.
Tiburón martillo. Este cuadro trata de las veces en que mi familia fue a nadar a la isla del Padre en el Golfo de México. Una vez al llegar, vimos un pescador que acababa de atrapar un tiburón martillo en la punta del muelle. Nunca me enteré de cómo logró llevar el tiburón a la playa. Daba mucho miedo ver el tiburón, porque era tan grande que se pudo haber tragado un niño pequeño de un solo bocado.
What did you like about the painting?
You know what I like about it? These kind of sand hills in the back. It just always makes me wonder what's back there.
They are pretty. Maybe a town?
Maybe. Here, let's shift now to the next painting. This one really
It goes back.
reminds us a little bit of summer nights.
Back to like the house.
And this one is titled Watermelon.
Because they're having watermelon. And I like this picture because I love watermelon and I like how the porch is so lit up and I like the moon. Because in my school, we've been practicing like these sunrise and sunset and all these kinds of paintings and dawn and dusk paintings and stuff like that. So I like this moon.
Oh, that's right. That's a good eye. I love this little light here, how bright it is. I could almost hear the insects plopping against it on that hot summer night. And I could almost feel that cool, cold watermelon.
Yeah, I love watermelon. It was a hot summer evening. The whole family was on the front porch. My grandfather had brought us some watermelon that afternoon. We put them in the refrigerator and left them chill down. After supper, we went out to the front porch. My father cut the watermelon and gave one of us a slice. It was fun to sit out there. The light was so bright on the porch that you couldn't see beyond the edge of the lit area. It was like being in our own little world.
That's right. Sandía. Era una noche calurosa de verano. Toda la familia estaba en el porche. Mi abuelo nos había traído unas sandías esa tarde. Las pusimos en la nevera para enfriarlas. Después de la cena salimos al porche. Mi padre cortó la sandía y nos dio un pedazo a cada uno. Era divertido estar sentados ahí afuera. La luz del porche era tan fuerte que no se podía ver más allá del espacio que estaba iluminado. Era como estar en un pequeño mundo, solo nuestro. And this will be our final painting that we'll share with you all today.
But let's look at the picture again.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I wanted to say something. I'm thinking maybe they took a picture of the painting and then they put it in this book.
Oh,
Or it's the real canvas.
well, no,
they painted on
this is definitely probably a picture or a scan of some kind.
Of painting.
Yeah, I wonder how big the painting actually is.
Probably like this long and this big.
We'll have to find out.
Because that would be interesting.
So we're going to move now to the final painting.
Which is way further.
Here we go. And this one is called Quinceañera. And why did you choose this one, Olive?
Because I like that, I just figured out today the quinceañera because I had never read this page before. I know my dad and me had read some of this book, but I never read all of it. So today I was very, very interested of the quinceañera. And the quinceañera basically means that it's the Spanish culture basically does it. And like, it's kind of like a wedding. Everybody dressed like the one who's turning that age, the 15, she chooses the dresses that the girls wear. And that's the one who's turning 15 in the car.
That's right. Yeah, I love the way that all the girls in the dresses make this great arc here. And then right in the middle, what do we see?
Someone running to the spot.
That's right, without shoes on, right, kind of running late.
Like Cinderella.
Here, let's read a little bit from this one.
Okay. Many years ago, as I passed by a church, I happened to see a quinceañera celebration. A girl was celebrating her 15th birthday. She made a grand entrance in a low-rider car that pulled up very slowly. She really took her time fixing her hair while all of her 14 attendants and their escorts waited to enter the court for a special mass. I was amazed that the girl dresses were hot pink instead of the usual pale colors worn for a quinceañera. I didn't have a quinceañera, even though my parents offered to give me one. It's very expensive to throw such a big party, and I didn't want to into a debt. But I put myself in this painting as one of the people watching. I'm the little girl in the red skirt at the top of the steps.
Here, let's point out where she is. Can you point out where the author is and the painter? That's right.
Right there.
Quinceañera. Hace muchos años, mientras pasaba enfrente de una iglesia, vi por casualidad que se celebraba una quinceañera. Una muchacha cumplía los 15 años. Llegó en un lowrider bajito que se movía muy despacito. La muchacha se tardaba en arreglarse el pelo, mientras sus 14 damas y sus chambelanes esperaban para entrar a la iglesia, donde se celebraría una misa muy especial. Me sorprendió que los vestidos de las damas fueran de un color rosa brillante, en vez de ser de colores pálidos, como de costumbre. A mí no me celebraron una quinceañera al cumplir los 15 años. Mis padres me ofrecieron una, pero yo les dije que no. Cuesta mucho montar una fiesta así de grande, y yo no quise que ellos gastaran tanto. Pero me incluí a mí misma en este cuadro, como si hubiera estado observando la escena. Soy la niñita de la falda roja y me puedes ver en el escalón más alto. What do you think, Olivia? Will you be having a 15s, the quinceañera?
I don't know.
Well, we have plenty of time to figure that out.
Because I'm not turning 15 anytime soon. I'm only turning 8 this year, but I'm not turning 15 this year. I'm not 14. I'm 7.
Well, thank you all for listening, and if you enjoyed some of these paintings and some of the stories that are associated with them, We really encourage you all to pick up this book. It's really beautiful, and there are so many more paintings. We just covered a few. So let's say thank you and
Thank you.
take care.
Hello, my name is Rachel Balzano, and this is my third time getting to partake in TCPL Foundation's The Readathon. I am so excited to be back and have had a trend in past years where I have been dressing up in some way that connects to what I'm reading. My first year I did F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Last year I did Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. This year I wanted to give myself a break. We've been in a pandemic now for over a year, and while I really wanted to read from Zelda Fitzgerald's novel, Save Me the Waltz, I thought about what a hard year it's been, all the pleasure that I've been able to find in reading, and definitely reading different genres that maybe I would have thought twice before picking up, has been such a solace to me. So I decided to read something that brings me a lot of joy. And so I will be reading a story from the Paddington Treasury Collection, and I have a little Paddington bear with me here. I absolutely love Paddington, and he just really focuses on being kind to others and doing what's right, and I think that's always a great reminder to us. So, let's get started. And I will, I promise, show the pictures. My mother is a children's elementary school librarian, so I have learned well the best way to show pictures. Paddington. Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on a railway platform. In fact, that was how he came to have such an unusual name for a bear, because Paddington was the name of the station. The Browns were waiting to meet their daughter, Judy, when Mr. Brown noticed something small and furry near the lost luggage office. "It looks like a bear," he said. "A bear?" repeated Mrs. Brown. "In Paddington Station? Don't be silly, Henry. That can't be." But Mr. Brown was right. It was sitting on an old leather suitcase marked "Wanted on Voyage," and as they drew near it, it stood up and politely raised its hat. "Good afternoon," it said. "May I help you?" "It's very kind of you," said Mr. Brown, "but as a matter of fact, we were wondering if we could help you." "You're a very small bear," said Mrs. Brown. "Where are you from?" The bear looked around carefully before replying. "Darkest Peru. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway." Uh-oh. "You don't mean to say you've come all the way from South America on your own," exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "Whatever did you do for food?" Unlocking the suitcase, the bear took out an almost empty glass jar. "I ate marmalade," it said. "Bears like marmalade." Mrs. Brown looked at the label around the bear's neck. It said quite simply, "Please look after this bear. Thank you." "Oh, Henry," she cried, "we can't leave him here all by himself. There's no knowing what might happen to him. Can't he come home and stay with us?" "Stay with us?" repeated Mr. Brown nervously. He looked down at the bear. Would you like that?" he asked. "That is," he added hastily, "if you have nothing else planned." "Oh, yes," replied the bear. "I would like that very much. I've nowhere to go, and everyone seems in such a hurry." I don't know if Mr. Brown really wants them to go home. "That settles it," said Mrs. Brown. "Now, you must be thirsty after your journey. Mr. Brown can get you some tea while I go and meet our daughter Judy." "But Mary," said Mr. Brown, "we don't even know its name." Mrs. Brown thought for a moment. "I know," she said. "We'll call him Paddington, after the station." Paddington! The bear tested it several times to make sure. It sounds very important. Mr. Brown tried it out next. "Follow me, Paddington," he said. "I'll take you to the snack bar." Be nice to go to the snack bar. Mr. Brown was as good as his word. Paddington had never seen so many snacks on one tray, and he didn't know which to try first. He was so hungry and thirsty, he climbed up onto the table to get a better look. Mr. Brown turned away, pretending he had a tea with a bear in Paddington Station every day of his life. I would definitely be surprised if I saw that. "Henry!" cried Mrs. Brown when she arrived with Judy. "What are you doing to that poor bear?" Paddington jumped up to raise his hat, and in his haste he stepped on a strawberry tart, skidded on the cream, and fell backward into his cup of tea. "Oh no!" I don't think Mr. Brown was doing a good job watching him. "I think we'd better go before anything else happens," said Mr. Brown. Judy took hold of Paddington's paw. "Come along," she said. "We'll take you home and you can meet Mrs. Bird and my brother, Jonathan." Mr. Brown led the way to a waiting taxi. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens, please," he said. The driver stared at Paddington. "Bears is extra," he growled. "Sticky bears is twice as much, and make sure none of it comes off on my interior. It was clean when I set out this morning." Not a very nice taxi driver. The sun was shining as they drove out of the station, and there were cars and big red buses everywhere. Paddington waved to some people waiting at a bus stop, and several of them waved back. It was all very friendly. Paddington tapped the taxi driver on his shoulder. "It isn't a bit like Darkest Peru," he announced. The man jumped at the sound of Paddington's voice. "Cream," he said bitterly. "Cream and jam all over me coat." He slid the little window behind him shut. "Oh, dear Henry," murmured Mrs. Brown. "I wonder if we're doing the right thing." Fortunately, before anyone had time to answer, they arrived at Windsor Gardens and Judy helped Paddington onto the pavement. "Now you're going to meet Mrs. Bird," she said. "She looks after us. She's a bit fierce at times, but she doesn't really mean it. I'm sure you'll like her." Paddington felt his knees begin to wobble. "I'm sure I shall, if you say so," he replied. "The thing is, will she like me?" And Mrs. Bird and Jonathan are looking in the window. What's going to happen? "Goodness gracious!" exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "What have you got there?" "It's not a what," said Judy. "It's a bear called Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us." "A bear," said Mrs. Bird as Paddington raised his hat. "Well, he has good manners, I'll say that for him." "I'm afraid I stepped on a jam tart by mistake," said Paddington. "I can see that," said Mrs. Bird. "You'd better have a bath before you're very much older. Judy can turn it on for you. I dare say you'll be wanting some marmalade, too." "I think she likes you," whispered Judy. I think that was a nice warm welcome. Paddington had never been in a bathroom before, and while the water was running, he made himself at home. First of all, he tried writing his new name in the steam on the mirror. Then he used Mr. Brown's shaving foam to draw a map of Peru on the floor. It wasn't until a drip landed on his head that he remembered what he was supposed to be doing. He soon discovered that getting into a bath is one thing, but it's quite another matter again. He soon discovered that getting into the bath is one thing, but it's quite another matter getting out again, especially when it's full of soapy water. Paddington tried calling out, "Help!" at first in a quiet voice, so as to not disturb anyone, and then very loudly, "Help! Help!" When that didn't work, he began bailing the water out with his hat. But the hat had several holes in it, and his map of Peru soon turned into a sea of foam. Suddenly, Jonathan and Judy burst into the bathroom and lifted a dripping Paddington onto the floor. "Thank goodness you're all right," cried Judy. "We heard you calling out." "Fancy making such a mess," said Jonathan admiringly. "You should have pulled the plug out." "Oh," said Paddington. "I never thought of that." Paddington's made quite a big mess, I would say. When Paddington came downstairs, he looked so clean no one could possibly be cross with him. His fur was all soft and silky, his nose gleamed, and his paws had lost all traces of the jam and cream. The Browns made room for him in a small armchair, and Mrs. Bird brought him a pot of tea and a plate of hot buttered toast and marmalade. That sounds very ideal. If anyone is watching this and wants to get me a small armchair, some tea, and buttered toast with marmalade, I would accept and say thank you. "Now," said Mrs. Brown, "you must tell us all about yourself. I am sure you must have had lots of adventures." "I have," said Paddington earnestly. "Things are always happening to me. I'm that sort of a bear." He settled back into the armchair. "I was brought up by my Aunt Lucy in darkest Peru," he began. "But she had to go into the home for retired bears in Lima." He closed his eyes thoughtfully, and a hush fell over the room as everyone waited expectantly. After a while, when nothing happened, they began to get restless. Mr. Brown tried coughing, and then he reached across and poked Paddington. "Well, I never," he said. "I do believe he's fast asleep." "After all that's happened to him," said Mrs. Brown, "is it any wonder?" And there he is. We have Paddington sleeping very peacefully after his very big adventure of getting to London, all the way from darkest Peru. I hope you enjoyed the first Paddington story, written by Michael Bond and illustrated by R.W. Alley. Feel free to check him out. He has a movie and a few TV shows, and I hope that he brings some joy to you. And I hope that you are enjoying the readathon, and thank you so much for all of your donations that go to helping us buy materials and support our library. Thank you so much, and I'll hopefully see you next year.
Greetings, my name is Clarke Maynard, and I am sitting in this comfy chair in the public library. Can you actually believe in the public library? This is my favorite place. This is like a second home to me, and I know that I'll be coming more often when this pandemic kind of subsides. But I'm doing this because I love books, particularly children's books. I've been an educator and retired now, and I still love books. I'm a lifelong learner. And I have this wonderful book that was given to me by my sorority sister, and it's a book of poetry for young people. And the poems are written by my favorite poet, Langston Hughes. But I discovered something very exciting. I discovered a artist by the name of Benny Andrews. Benny Andrews painted lots and lots of beautiful pictures and art for these lovely poems that Langston Hughes has written. How did I discover Benny Andrews? Well, my sorority was giving these art talks just recently in partnership with the Rockwell Museum, who has a collection of beautiful art by Benny Andrews. So I would like to read some of my most famous poems by Langston Hughes. The first poem I'm going to read, and I'm going to show you first the beautiful illustrations. And the first poem is called Mother to Son. Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stairs. It has tacked onto it and splinters and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor bare. But all the time I've been a-climbing and reaching and landing and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. Oh boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you'll find it harder and kinda harder. Don't you fall now, for I've done seen you going, honey. I'm still climbing. For me, ain't life for me, ain't been no crystal stairs. Mother to Son. And I'm going to continue reading some more of these beautiful poems by Langston Hughes. So I just love Langston. My people. When I taught second grade, this was one of the poems that I shared with my beautiful second graders at Beverly J. Martin Elementary School. The night is beautiful, so the faces of my people. The stars are beautiful, so the eyes of my people. Beautiful also is the sun. Beautiful also is the soul of my people. Continuing on with beautiful Langston poems. This one is called The Dream Keeper. Beautiful art by Benny Andrews. Dreams. Bring me all your dreams. You dreamer, bring me all of your heart melodies, that I may wrap them up in a blue cloth, away from the two rough fingers of the world. And you see the beautiful cloth to illustrate that beautiful poem called The Dream Keepers. The next poem I like to read to you is I Too. And I love Benny Andrews. I fell in love with him because, again, he really brings out that spirit of Langston Hughes' poems. So he's, I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and I eat well, and I grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table. When company comes, nobody out there say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, I'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Beautiful. You can see why I fell in love with Langston Hughes. He's so poetic. His words really flow. It really speaks to us. We can kind of reach out and grab it. We can relate to it. This one is called The Homesick Blues. Again, gorgeous illustrations in this beautiful poetry book for young people. This one is called The Homesick Blues. Dumb railroad bridges, a sad song in the air. Them railroad bridges, a sad song in the air. Every time them train pass, I want to go somewhere. I went down to the station, my heart was in my mouth. Went down to that station, my heart was in my mouth. Looking for a boxcar, to roll me to the south. Homesick blues, Lord, homesick blues. It's the terrible thing to be here. Homesick blues is a terrible thing to have. Keep crying, to open my mouth and laugh. What a feeling, what a feeling. Homesick blues. Now this one is an art piece again by Benny Andrews that I fell in love with this guy playing the piano, and being able to depict what's going on. You have a young man playing another instrument, looks like a banjo or guitar, and you have some children listening. And this poem is called Hey, Hey, Hey. I love it. Hey, hey. Suns are sitting in, this is what I'm going to sing. Suns are sitting in, this is what I'm going to sing. I feel them blues coming. I feel them blues coming. Wonder what them blues bring. Suns are rising. This is going to be my song. Suns are rising. This is going to be my song. I could be blue, but I've been blue all night long. And I tried to imitate the language, which makes it more fun for me. Because this is something that, you really have to kind of get in that mood, get in that feeling. Okay, this again is another painting by Benny Andrews set to the poem of Genius Child. All our children are geniuses. This is a song for the genius child. Sing it softly, for the song is wild. Sing it softly as you ever can, lest the song get out of hand. Nobody loves a genius child, but can you love an eagle, tame or wild? Wild or tame, can you love a monster of frightening name? Nobody loves a genius child. Kill him and let his soul run wild. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful setting of a mom and a child. Rocking chair brings a lot of peace, a good feeling. Okay, well, this one is called The Merry-Go-Round, and this one talks about a colored child at a carnival. That was a language that was used many years ago to describe people of color, Negro. This one is a social justice one. Langston Hughes wrote about several social and political issues, and this one was entitled Merry-Go-Round. And again, the illustrations are just so captivating and so vibrant and so colorful, like I am. I'm very colorful. Yeah. Where is the Jim Crow section? Okay, Jim Crow was a section in history where a lot of laws forbid if you didn't look a certain way, you had to go and be in a certain place. On this merry-go-round, Mr. calls, I want to ride. Down south where I come from, white and colored can't sit side by side. Down south on the train, there's a Jim Crow car. On the bus, we put in the back, but there isn't and there ain't no back to a merry-go-round with a horse for a kid that's black. Powerful, powerful poem. Makes much for lots of conversation as to why that kid cannot ride that carousel. This poem is called Words Like Freedom. Langston Hughes had a strong interest in his African American heritage, and again, he was a strong advocate for social and political injustices, and he expressed his feelings in a lot of his poems. This poem actually is two poems. One is called Words Like Freedom, and the other one is called Still Here. And again, the beautiful illustrations really depicts and really brings out the feeling that you get when you read and when you listen and when you look at this beautiful book. There are words like freedom, sweet and wonderful to say. On my heartstrings, freedom sings all day, every day. There are words like liberty that almost make me cry. If you hadn't known what I know, you would have known why. Words like freedom. This poem is called Still Here. Wow, Still Here. Langston Hughes wrote poems about the African American struggle for a better existence in our racially divided America. Okay, and this poem is called Still Here. I've been scared and battered. My hopes the wind done scattered. Snow has froze me, frizzed me, sun has baked me. Look like I'm been between. They've done tried to make me. I love these words. Stop laughing, stop loving, stop living, but I don't care. I'm still here. That's real confidence. That's real affirmation. I'm still here. And I would like to read another poem called Harlem. Now, I have a connection to Harlem because I was born and reared in Harlem, New York, and I grew up there, and I could identify with a lot of the words, particularly Langston Hughes' words, because Langston Hughes, during the Harlem Renaissance, was one of the very famous writers and authors during that time, during the Harlem, and it's the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance. So in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance, and an appreciation and honor for my ancestors and the people in Harlem where I was born and raised, I like to read Langston Hughes' poem, Harlem. Langston Hughes' poetry also talks about dreams, okay? And this one is called Harlem, and it says, what happened to a dream deferred? That's one of my favorite poems. Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sword and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat of crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? What happened to a dream deferred? Drums. 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 Langston Hughes visually, he likes to describe historical events. And when I was growing up in Harlem, I lived near a park called, at that time it was called Montmartre Park. It was a place where George Washington would settle his troops. And they had a bell tower, and they had these wonderful stairs that I used to run up and down as a kid with my cousins and neighborhood kids in Harlem. And every Saturday, there would be a group of men or women drumming, and they would tell stories of things that went on in Harlem, and it was wonderful. And you could hear the drums for miles and miles around Harlem. That's how loud it was. Every Saturday. So this poem reminds me of my childhood again in Harlem, and every Saturday hearing those drum beats in my neighborhood. Drums. I dream of the drums and remember the nights without stars in Africa. Remember, remember, remember. I dream of the drums and remember the slave ships, the Bellabin sails, the Western Ocean, and the landing at Jamestown. Remember, remember. I dream of drums and recall like pictures the Congo Square in New Orleans. Sunday the slaves on the day of freedom, the Java dance in the Congo Square. I dream of the drums and hear again the Jelly Roll piano of Buddy Bolton's trumpet. Jazz, I dream of the drum and remember Africa, the ships, the new shores and drums. Remember, I remember, remember. Oh, we're at the end of my favorite book, Poetry for Young People, Langston Hughes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom,
Hi, I'm Noah.
and we're reading for Tompkins County Public Library. Noah, why is the library important to you?
Because we get to borrow books and read them at the library.
Okay, and what are we reading today?
The Guardians of the Galaxy.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. The Guardians of the Galaxy. There's the page. Okay. Deep in outer space, the Guardians of the Galaxy are always ready for action. This ragtag team of heroes protects the universe from all sorts of interstellar threats. Leading the Guardians is Peter Quill. I'm not going to show them all the pictures, buddy. Leading the Guardians is Peter Quill.
Then just show them the cover.
Okay. Better known as Star-Lord. He is part human and part alien. Star-Lord has amazing strength and speed, and his rocket boots blast him into battle. Whoosh.
Whoosh.
Fighting alongside Star-Lord is the green-skinned Gamora. She is the last of her species, an alien race called the Zenhubiri. Gamora is a skilled warrior who can heal very quickly from any injury. Should I show them the picture?
Can you show them all the pictures?
I'll do my best. Rocket Raccoon is an expert pilot. He may look cute and fuzzy, but he's no house pet. His sharp claws and enhanced senses make him tough to beat. His best friend is Groot. He is a tall, tree-like creature who can control plants and grow to an immense size. This odd couple is a powerful pair. The last member of the Guardians is the super strong Drax. He is so tough, he can survive in the extreme cold of space without air, food, or water. The Guardians of the Galaxy search the universe for adventure in Star-Lord's spaceship, the Milano. Rawr! I'll get you, Guardians.
So.
The Guardians' home base is called Nowhere, and Cosmo the dog is their chief of security. Cosmo helps them sniff out trouble. The Guardians have many different frightful foes. throughout the galaxy.
Can you read their names?
Okay, ready? There's Thanos, Ronan, Proxima Midnight, the Grand Master, Maelstrom, Korvac, and Nebula.
Nebula is easy to recognize. I mean, you can recognize because of that gray claw hand thing.
Ronan the Accuser is a sinister soldier. Are you saying something?
And you can recognize Nebula if she's a superhero or a bad guy with seeing her clothes.
Right. Ronan the Accuser is a sinister soldier with super speed, super strength, and quick reflexes. He wields a giant hammer called the Universal Weapon. He can use it to crush almost anything. Smash. Like Ronan, Korath the Pursuer is a member of the alien Currie race. He carries 2 batons that fire powerful bolts of energy.
Goodness, I get that speedy when goodness.
The Collector is an ancient being who travels the universe acquiring alien artifacts, especially those with great power. Unfortunately for the Collector and the fearsome Tiger Man Titus, Rocket Raccoon and Groot don't play by his rules. Chomp. My bite is worse than Groot's bark.
Goodness.
Oh, that's so silly.
That's hilarious.
Hilarious.
A tree barking.
Well, trees have bark, right? Feared across the galaxy, the space pirate Nebula is a cyborg. She may be part machine, but she's all trouble for the Guardians and the bad guys too. Proxima Midnight is a master of hand-to-hand combat. Her deadliest weapon is a spear made from pure star energy. Zap!
Went right through his arm.
Possibly the greatest menace to the galaxy is Thanos. His life's goal is to control the entire universe. Thanos has teamed up with other villains to try to defeat the Guardians of the Galaxy. The monstrous Black Dwarf, the energy blade-wielding Corvus Glaive, and the mind-eating telepath Supergiant are also minions of Thanos. With all these powerful henchmen at his side, Thanos thinks he is invulnerable, but the Guardians plan to prove him wrong. When the Guardians of the Galaxy face off against Thanos and his terrible team, the fight is fierce, but good ultimately overpowers evil. With the battle won, Star-Lord and his friends head home. The universe will always be safe under the protection of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Go, Guardians, go! I think we have time for another story. Which one do you want to read next? You want to read The Mighty Thor next?
Yep.
Okay. So Mighty Thor. Settle down, please. Sit up.
Here's my closet.
Okay. The Mighty Thor. Far away in the land of Asgard, brave warriors fought ogres, trolls, dragons, frost giants, and monsters of all kinds. Oh, I didn't turn the page. Sorry. Sit up, please. The bravest, strongest warrior in all of Asgard was named Thor. No monster could withstand his might. Thor's father, Odin, was the king of Asgard. Odin was proud of his brave son. Odin showed Thor the most powerful weapon in the land, a magical hammer called Mjolnir. You say Mjolnir?
Mjolnir.
Good job. Thor tried to lift the hammer, but even with his great strength, he could not. Odin told Thor that only a truly valiant warrior could lift the hammer. Thor vowed to become a hero worthy of the mighty hammer. Thor fought many powerful foes. And he was victorious in every battle. Gosh, on this page. He even fought a dragon. After many adventures, Thor felt he was a worthy warrior. Thor went to Odin's palace and told his father that he was ready to try to lift Mjolnir once again. I think that is Thor's mom. I think it's Frigga. As the people of Asgard watched, Thor lifted the heavy hammer into the air. He was worthy. With the magical hammer, Thor could control thunder, lightning, and wind. By spinning the hammer over his head, Thor could even soar through the air. The mighty Thor vowed that he would always use his strength and powerful hammer to fight for good. And that's the end. Do you want to try to read one more?
Sure.
Which one? I don't want to read the Hulk.
Yes, one.
The Hulk?
Yes.
Alright, the Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk. He's huge, he's green, and he's a hero who can smash anything. He's the Incredible Hulk. When a scientist named Bruce Banner was accidentally bombarded with gamma rays, the powerful energy turned him into an incredible green-skinned giant, the Hulk. Roar. Hulk is super strong and almost nothing can hurt him. The madder Hulk gets, the stronger he gets. No enemy is too big for him to tackle. Grrr. Hulk can leap miles with his mighty leg muscles and can create powerful sonic booms by clapping his hands together. Correct. The Hulk is a hero, but some people, like General Thunderbolt Ross, think he is a monster. Ross wants to capture the Hulk, but he and the army can never hold Hulk for long. Hulk faces many fearsome foes. Abomination is a scaly, gamma-powered monster who is as strong as the Hulk. Rhino has a sharp horn on his head that uses it to ram his enemies. Boom. That was a tongue twister. The leader has a big mutated brain that makes him super smart, but instead of using his intelligence to help people, the leader is always coming up with evil plans to take over the world. Zax is a monster made of pure energy. This power-hungry creature wants to absorb the Hulk's life force to make itself invisible. Zap! Absorbing Man is a thug with the ability to become anything he touches. He can be as slippery as a puddle of water or as strong as steel. But Absorbing Man is still no match for the Hulk. No one has fun when the circus of crime comes to town. These performers use their astounding circus skills to break the law. But when they try to make the Hulk part of their act, he brings the big top down on them. That's a big snake, huh?
Mm-hmm. And then he starts falling away from them.
Mm-hmm. The Hulk also fights alongside the superheroes such as the Avengers. No matter which foes they face, the Hulk is always ready to help them save the world. And the Hulk always wins. Hulk strongest there is. Okay. The Hulk is an incredible hero and a gentle giant. Just don't make him angry. Go Hulk! Alrighty, that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. Please support the library. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Margaret Soulstein, and I'm reading in the Tompkins County Public Library 2021 Readathon because I love books and reading and communal resources. I love that the library is available to everyone. I love how books can teach, inspire, and delight. The library is such an important part of my family's daily and weekly rhythms. I hate to imagine our lives without the library. We would certainly read so many fewer books. And during this past year of life in the time of coronavirus, being able to expand our horizons through books has been invaluable and made this time more enriching. I'm thrilled to be able to help raise money that entirely goes towards buying books for the library. Thanks to everyone who's donated. And with that, let's read. I will be reading A House is a House for Me by Marianne Hoberman, illustrated by Betty Fraser. A house is a house for me. A hill is a house for an ant. A hive is a house for a bee. A hole is a house for a mole or a mouse. And a house is a house for me. A web is a house for a spider. A bird builds its nest in a tree. There is nothing so snug as a bug in a rug. And a house is a house for me. A coop, that's a house for a chicken. A sty, that's a house for a sow. A fold, that's where sheep all gather to sleep. A barn, that's a house for a cow. It is also, of course, a house for a horse. A kennel is a house for a dog. A dog. A dog is a house for a flea. But when a dog strays, a flea sometimes stays, and then it may move in on me. Houses for rabbits are hutches. A house for a mule is a shed. A castle is a house for a duchess. A bedbug beds down in a bed. Mosquitoes like mudholes or puddles. Whales need an ocean or sea. A fish or a snake may make do with a lake, but a house is a house for me. A shell is a dwelling for shellfish, for oysters and lobsters and clams. Each snail has a shell and each turtle as well, but not any lions or lambs. Lions live out in the open. Monkeys live up in a tree. Hippos live down in a river. Now what do you know about me? An igloo's a house for an Eskimo. A teepee's a house for a Cree. A pueblo's a house for a Hopi, and a wigwam may hold a Mohi. A garage is a house for a car or a truck. A hangar is a house for a plane. A dock or a slip is a house for a ship, and a terminal's house for a train. A husk is a house for a corn ear. A pod is a place for a pea. A nutshell is a hut for a hickory nut. But what is a shelter for me? A glove is a house for a hand. A hand. A stocking's a house for a knee. A shoe or a boot is a house for a foot. And a house is a house for me. A box is a house for a tea bag. A teapot's a house for some tea. If you pour me a cup and I drink it all up, then the tea house will turn into me. Cartons are houses for crackers. Houses are castles for kings. The more that I think about houses, the more things are houses for things. And if you get started in thinking, I think you will find it is true that the more that you think about houses for things, the more things are houses to you. Barrels are houses for pickles, and bottles are houses for jam. A pot is a spot for potatoes. A sandwich is home for some ham. The cookie jar is home to the cookies. The bread box is home to the bread. My coat is a house for my body. My hat is a house for my head. Perhaps I have started far-fetching. Perhaps I am stretching things some. A mirror is a house for reflections. A throat is a house for a hum. But once you get started in thinking, you think and you think and you think. How pockets are houses for pennies, and pens can be houses for ink. How peaches are houses for peach pits, and sometimes are houses for worms. How trash cans are houses for garbage, and garbage makes houses for germs. And envelopes, earmuffs, and eggshells, and bathrobes and baskets and bins, and rag bags and rubbers and roasters, and tablecloths, toasters, and tins. And once you get started in thinking this way, it seems that whatever you see is either a house or it lives in a house, and a house is a house for me. A book is a house for a story. A rose is a house for a smell. My head is a house for a secret I never will tell. A flower is at home in a garden. A donkey's at home in a stall. Each creature that's known has a house of its own, and the earth is a house for us all. Up next, Richard Scarry's The Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the cat family house, not a creature was stirring. Almost. Sally Cat can't sleep. Huckle, Sally asks, when is Santa coming? I can't wait any longer for Christmas. Just a few more days, Sally, Huckle says. Now, go back to sleep. Good night. Christmas spirit. Oh my, says Mr. Frumble. It's almost Christmas. Mr. Frumble loves Christmas because then he can help others in the true Christmas spirit. He holds the door open at the grocery store, but that doesn't make Grocer Hank very happy. Mr. Frumble offers to shovel snow, but that doesn't make Papa Cat very happy. Mr. Frumble offers to carry Hilda Hippo's Christmas gifts. He helps Mr. Gronkle put his Christmas tree in his car. But he makes no one happy. Says Mr. Frumble. If no one in Busytown needs my help before Christmas, I think I know someone else who does. Mr. Frumble gets into his pickle car and drives over to Mr. Fixit's workshop. Does Mr. Fixit need Mr. Frumble's help? Of course not. Mr. Frumble needs Mr. Fixit's help. Mr. Frumble explains to Mr. Fixit what he needs. No trouble at all, Mr. Frumble. Mr. Fixit replies, I can do that in a jiffy. Oh, thank you, Mr. Fixit, Mr. Frumble says. A moment later, Mr. Fixit reappears, pushing Mr. Frumble's pickle car outside. Voila, he says proudly. Your ski pickle do. Oh, my, gulps Mr. Frumble. And so that you can find your way, here is a compass to point you all the way to the North Pole, says Mr. Fixit. What are you going to do with the North Pole? asks Mr. Fixit. I'm going to someone who needs my help, answers Mr. Frumble. I'm going to be one of Santa's helpers. Bon voyage, calls Mr. Fixit. Don't forget to be home for Christmas. It's the day after tomorrow. Spring, 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 spring. Look out, everybody. Here comes Mr. Frumble. Spring, whoops, spring, hey, spring, swish, spring, spring, yikes, spring, spring, hey, spring. Mr. Frumble rides through rain. He rides through fog. He rides through snow. He rides over tall mountains. He rides down steep slopes. Mr. Frumble rides until the ski pickle do can be ridden no more. Oomph. Santa's new helper. Dear me, says Mr. Frumble. Poor Ski Pickle Doo will need some repairs if I'm ever going to get to the North Pole. Lucky for me, that looks like a garage up ahead. I'm sure they can help me. Mr. Frumble walks in the door. "Fill her up, please," he calls. "Check the oil and water. Clean the windshield, please." Is anybody here? Suddenly, Mr. Frumble slips on a puddle of water. Whoa, boom! Ploink goes his hat. "Ho, ho, ho! And who are you?" asks a great big fellow in red trousers. Mr. Frumble explains that he needs his Ski Pickle Doo repaired so that he can get to the North Pole. "Ho, ho! But you are the North Pole. I'm Santa Bear, and these are all my helpers. Welcome! I'm afraid we're too busy making toys for all the good girls and boys to repair your Ski Pickle Doo today," says Santa Bear. "Christmas is just 2 days away," says Santa Bear, pointing to the calendar on the wall. "No, wait," he cries. "Ho, ho! Oh no, it's already December 24? It's Christmas Eve!" "Helpers!" shouts Santa Bear. "Hurry, I have to go. Get the sleigh ready and bring the presents." "But we haven't finished yet," squeak his helpers. "Goodbye, helpers," Santa Bear calls, climbing the stairs to his sleigh. "Don't forget your hat, Santa Bear." Santa Bear climbs into his big red sleigh. "Are you ready, dears?" he asks. He shakes the reins, and away he soars. Mr. Frumble holds a calendar page in his hand. I think this came off when I came in," he says. "Oh no!" squeak the helpers. "Santa Bear has made a mistake. It isn't the night before Christmas. It's the night before Christmas." The night before Christmas. Santa Bear flies over Busytown. "That's odd," Santa Bear says. "There are no Christmas lights on this year." Santa Bear lands on the first rooftop and disappears down the chimney with his big bag of toys. "Humph," says Santa Bear. "This family has forgotten to decorate its Christmas tree." Santa Bear continues to make his rounds through Busytown. "This is a very strange Christmas," says Santa Bear. "Huckle, Sally, and Lowly haven't hung their stockings on the fireplace. Hilda hasn't left a cup of cocoa and plate of cookies as she does every night before Christmas. Sergeant Murphy hasn't even unwrapped his Christmas tree." Finally, Santa Bear arrives at Mr. Frumble's house. He slides with his bag down Mr. Frumble's chimney. But Mr. Frumble has turned his fireplace into a broom closet, and it's locked. Santa Bear's sack has become stuck above him. "Ho, ho," says Santa Bear. "What do I do now?" Santa Frumble. "What do we do now?" asks Mr. Frumble. "We have to help Santa Bear," say Santa Bear's helpers. "Someone has to take Santa Bear's place and deliver the toys to all the good boys and girls for Christmas," says one of Santa Bear's helpers. "But who will take Santa Bear's place?" asks Mr. Frumble. "You will," answer all of Santa Bear's helpers. "Me? Santa?" Meanwhile, the good boys and girls of Busytown can't understand why they all received presents before Christmas Eve, and why all the boxes are empty. "There must be a mistake," says Lowly. Santa Bear's helpers work busily all day to finish the toys which they couldn't give to Santa Bear. They also repair Mr. Frumble's Ski Pickle Doo. Mr. Frumble helps the helpers fill the toy sack. "How will we get to Busytown?" Mr. Frumble asks. "We will pull you," say Santa Bear's helpers. "But we don't know where Busytown is," says one of Santa Bear's helpers. "Ah, but my hat does," replies Mr. Frumble. "Hat always finds his way home." Mr. Frumble takes off his hat and tosses it in the air. Off flies the hat. Off fly Santa Frumble and his busy helpers. Good luck, Santa Frumble. Tonight is the night before Christmas. All of Busytown is decorated with colorful Christmas lights. Santa Frumble lands at the Cat family house. Swish! He climbs off his Ski Pickle Doo. Who goes down the chimney?" Santa Frumble asks the helpers. "You do," they all reply. Santa Frumble climbs down the Cat family chimney. Boom! "Shh, Santa Frumble, you don't want to wake the children." Santa Frumble fills the stockings that Huckle, Sally, and Lowly have hung on their fireplace. Then he sits down to sip some hot cocoa and eat the cookies the children have left for Santa Bear. Santa Frumble gets up, but trips in the dark. Whoops! There goes the tree. Crash! Shh, Santa Frumble. Did you hear that? Says Sally excitedly. I'll bet that was Santa. Shh, whispers Huckle. Go back to sleep, Sally. If Santa knows you're awake, he won't leave you a present. Santa Frumble hurries on his way. Santa Frumble visits Hilda Hippo's house. He visits Sergeant Murphy's house. And after he has visited every other house in Busytown, Santa Frumble arrives at his own house. Santa Frumble looks down his chimney. But Santa Frumble decides to enter his house through the front door. What a clever Santa you are, Mr. Frumble. He opens the broom closet. My hat, he says. Our Santa, say all of Santa Bear's helpers. What are you doing here? Santa Bear asks Mr. Frumble. There was a big mistake at the North Pole, says Mr. Frumble. You left on the night before Christmas, say Santa Bear's helpers. Thank goodness Santa Frumble was there to bring all the presents to good boys and girls on the night before Christmas. Santa Bear thanks Santa Frumble and rides back to the North Pole on his empty toy sack. There is nothing left in the sack, so Santa Bear leaves Mr. Frumble the best present he can think of. To my number one helper, Mr. Frumble, Merry Christmas, Santa Bear. Wow, how about that?
Hi, I'm Sam Fink, and today I'm reading Kingdom Keepers Book 1, Disney After Dark by Ridley Pearson. I'm doing the readathon because I appreciate being able to take books out of public libraries and want to give something back to them. This is my 8th readathon. Chapter 1. He found himself standing next to the flagpole in Town Square, in the heart of the Magic Kingdom, in his pajamas. How he'd gotten here, he had no idea. His last memory was climbing into bed. It felt like only minutes earlier. Gripped by a sense of panic, awed by the sight of the Cinderella castle at night, Finn Whitman briefly recalled that he'd had other similar dreams recently, always in the Magic Kingdom, always at night. But in his 13 years, none so real, so vivid as this. He felt a breeze on his face. He smelled the wet earth of a flower bed not far away. He heard the distant whine of traffic and the buzz of a motorboat on the lake behind him. It looked so different, he thought, only to realize he'd spoken out loud. Main Street stood empty, not a person in sight. He glanced around and quickly saw that he was all alone. Not so different as all that, came a man's voice. Though faint, it startled Finn. He looked around again, this time trying to find the source of that voice. There, an old guy with white hair on a bench in front of the exhibition hall. He sat so close to a seated sculpture of Goofy that Finn hadn't noticed him. Finn moved toward the man, crossing the empty street. He felt unusually light, almost buoyant. The old man wore khakis, a collared shirt, and a name tag, Wayne. Where is everybody? Finn asked, struck by the electronic sound of his own voice. Is it empty? The man asked, looking up anxiously. Tell me what you see. Finn wondered if the old guy was blind. He seemed to be looking right at Finn. His blue eyes looked perfectly normal. Still, maybe he couldn't see. Well, Finn said politely, it's like empty, and it's dark out, and it's just the two of us. Wayne's expression changed to disappointment. What am I supposed to see exactly? Finn asked. You're only supposed to see what you can see. Whatever that means, Finn said. It means exactly what it says. If you say so. Listen, young man, I've been around here since long before any of them were even created. I live in the apartment above the fire station. He pointed right at the firehouse and then looks back at Finn. That takes some seniority, believe me. Yes. Seniority or senility, Finn wondered. Living above the firehouse? Finn doubted it. Nice pajamas, the old guy said. Finn looked down at himself. His pajamas seemed to be glowing. What was with that? He said. I don't mean to be rude, but if you can see, if you're not blind, then why'd you ask me about the park being empty? Wayne's ice blue eyes drilled into him. How do you think you got here, young man? That depends on where I am, Finn answered honestly. This felt like no dream he'd ever experienced. Very good answer. I expected no less of you. Excuse me? I assumed that you'd question this. That's only natural, but ultimately there's only one explanation, isn't there? Is there? Finn asked, confused. The other ones The other ones I wasn't so sure about, but you, Finn Whitman. By the way, that's a fine name you have, a name with real potential. Finn took a step back. How did this old guy know his name? What other ones? Finn asked. He studied Town Square and Main Street. The street lamps shone yellow. The Cinderella Castle glowed in the distance. All the familiar streets and paths and attractions, but empty. I told you there's no one here, no one but us. It's empty. Wayne said nothing as he stood and walked up Main Street, past the shops and toward the castle. Finn found himself following right along. They reached Central Plaza, an island in the middle of in the center of a traffic circle, the spokes of which led to the Magic Kingdom's various lands. Tomorrowland, Frontierland, Liberty Square. They stopped in front of a statue of Walt Disney with Mickey Mouse. The castle rose majestically into the night sky. What time is it? Wayne asked. As Finn brought up his arm to look at his watch, he saw that his arm wasn't exactly his arm. It was glowing. Not only glowing, but he could almost see through it. As if, what's going on? Finn asked. What's with my arm? Wayne sounded critical as he said, figure it out. He then reached into his pocket and removed what looked like a remote control for a car. A small black plastic fob with a single red button. It looked like a garage door opener. What's with that thing? This button will send you... What's with that thing? Finn asked. This button will send you back. Back where? Finn felt a jolt of fear. What if this wasn't a dream? He studied his arm again, then his other arm. He looked down at his legs. His whole body was glowing and vaguely translucent. Back to bed, Wayne answered. So it is a dream. I thought so. It's not a dream. Finn saw a pair of 4-foot tall chipmunks come out of the castle. They walked down a path and turned left toward Toontown. He felt himself staring. He recognized them. What? Wayne asked excitedly. Nothing, Finn answered. You saw something. He practically shouted into Finn's ear, causing Finn to jump back, startled. Wayne leaped up, suddenly years younger. He pulled Finn to his feet. You saw something, he thundered. Hey, what's the big deal? Tell me what you saw. You saw it too, Finn told him. Which character? Finn felt relief. Wayne knew Finn had seen a character, which had to mean he'd seen it too. He was clearly playing some kind of game, making Finn actually name the character, but Finn was good at games. Which character did you see? Finn asked. You want me to push this button? Wayne threatened. Did he? Finn wasn't sure. If it was a dream, the black remote control fob represented a way out. When was the right time to use it? He hoped to stretch this out a minute longer. It was fun here. He glanced around at the sound of footsteps. Goofy went tearing past them, not 30 feet away, and headed into Frontierland. Wayne never moved, never looked in Goofy's direction. You're playing games with me, Finn said. Am I? Goofy, Finn said. Are you asking me if I'm goofy? I've been called worse, Wayne studied Finn. His old leathery face brightened as he said, You saw Goofy. Maybe Wayne needed a hearing aid. He seemed prone to fits of shouting. Finn backed off. Yeah, so what? You would have too if you'd bothered to look. Wayne probably couldn't hear all that well. He obviously hadn't heard Goofy's footsteps because he hadn't turned towards the sound. Finn decided to test Wayne. Chip and Dale, he said. You saw them, right? You saw Chip and Dale? He made it sound like Finn had won the lottery. What was with that? This is getting a little weird. I think I want to go back now. Finn heard himself repeat some of what Wayne had told him, although the words didn't fit in his mouth all that well. It sounded to him like someone else was doing the talking. I'll push the button if you like, but I have to warn you, Wayne fiddled with the name tag pinned to his uniform. Warn me about what? Well, you'll be missing the park after dark, basically all to yourself. The attractions operate day and night. Not many people know that. Now I know I'm dreaming. But you aren't, Wayne explained. Are you forgetting your arm? Finn studied his arm once more. I'll admit, that is interesting. It's almost like, Finn caught himself. Like you're glowing, Wayne said in an all-knowing, I told you so tone of voice. Am I? What might account for that? Wayne inquired. Finn understood somehow that a lot hung on his answer. His imagining this place or dreaming it or whatever was happening to him. His ability to stay here, to return. He wasn't quick to answer. He didn't want to face what Wayne was suggesting. I give up, he said. No, you don't, Wayne protested. You would never have been chosen for this if you were the kind who gives up on things. You're a finisher, Finn. That's what I liked about you from your first audition tape. Stunned by what the old guy had said, Finn felt his mouth go dry. How did Wayne know about his audition tape? Exactly how complicated could a dream get? Who are you? Finn blurted out. I'm Wayne. I work here. I was one of the first people hired by Walt Disney to imagine this park. The rides, the attractions, they call us Imagineers. You knew Walt Disney? Finn tried not to sound impressed. He was my boss, you might say. At any rate, he's the reason I'm here. The reason you're here. Me? I know this can't be easy. It's a dream, Finn said, thinking. What's so hard about a dream? No, it's not a dream, Wayne said. Take a look at the moon. Finn didn't move. Wayne's voice became more severe. I said, look at the moon. Finn had to turn around to locate the moon. A half moon, like a crooked smile, hung well above the horizon. When you think you wake up, take a look out the window. You'll see the same moon and you'll know. Know what? Finn asked. That you are here, sitting in Walt Disney World with an old guy named Wayne. You're telling me this isn't a dream? Finn felt his words catch in his throat. We've got a problem, a big problem, a problem that affects not only the park but the world outside the park. We call them the Overtakers. The what? Finn didn't like the sound of that. Wayne said urgently, you need to contact the other hosts, all 4. Arrange to meet them here at the same time. That will mean all of you going to bed, going to sleep, fairly close to the same time, within a half hour of one another. Tell them that. That should work, I think. What are you talking about? There's a fable, a story, a puzzle of sorts that was left in case of a problem like this. It's called the Stonecutter's Quill. A problem like what? Finn felt totally confused. The Stonecutter's Quill. The title had an eerie sound. Just then, Tom Sawyer came out of Frontierland and headed up a long ramp into the castle. Is that really the Tom Sawyer? Finn wondered. The barefoot boy was smoking a pipe with a long stem. Wayne did a good job of not reacting, pretending he didn't see the kid. Wayne said, the puzzle has to be solved to be understood. It has to be understood to be of any use to us. He paused and looked over at Finn. It felt to Finn as if Wayne were looking right through him. You're going to solve it. Me? The 5 of you, Wayne said. Finn jumped away from the man. Again, he thought, how complicated can a dream get? If Wayne was only a part of the dream, how could he possibly know about the 4 other hosts? How could he talk about Finn's audition tape the way he had? It was all related, rolled into one, but Finn couldn't sort it out. Finn said, You're talking about MGM Studios. Of course I am, Wayne said. You see, I knew you were the right one. You're the leader, Finn. I don't have the slightest clue what you're talking about, Finn said. Nice try, but of course you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You just don't want to face it. Perfectly understandable. That will change. A fable, Finn said, testing him again. Could a dream remember itself? The moon, Wayne reminded him. Don't forget the moon. I won't. All 5 of you. I need you together, here, all in the same place at the same time. I can explain it to you then. Once, as a group, just the one time. You can decide, as a group, to help us or not. Us? Finn said. I'll explain that as well. This is the weirdest dream I've ever had, Finn said, not realizing he was shouting. You'll get over it, Wayne said. He raised his right hand, the one carrying the black remote control fob, and pressed the button with his thumb. Finn awoke, sitting up in his bed. His bedside clock read 2:07 a.m. He collected himself, checked his surroundings. He reached out and touched the glass of water next to the clock. Just the feel of it was reassuring, he thought. Thank goodness, he thought. A dream, he wondered? Whoa, he heard himself say aloud. What a dream. This time his voice sounded more the way it had always sounded, which reminded him of how thin and electronic it had sounded in the park. Whoa, he repeated, just to hear himself say it. He scratched an itch on his head and another on his belly. That felt better. He lay back down, his head on the pillow, his green eyes wide open to the dark room. All at once, Finn spotted a shaft of light, bluish light on the ceiling. It was in the shape of a knife. Blade. Moonlight. Finn slipped out of the bed with trepidation. He crept toward the window, afraid to look. The closer he got to it, the more his face was bathed in the pale light seeping through a small crack in the curtains. Finn raised his arm and caught sight of his watch. His arm appeared solid. It did not glow and shimmer the way it had while he was with Wayne. That came as a relief. Finn parted the curtains. There, out the window, hanging in the exact same place in the sky where Wayne had pointed it out to him, Finn saw the curving smile of a half moon. Could he have known that in his sleep? How? He looked again. The moon seemed to be laughing at him.
Hi, I'm Kat, and today I'm helping raise money for TCPL because public libraries are one of our single best educational resources as a society. Growing up, public libraries helped me expand my love of reading outside the limits of the classroom and find new worlds, ideas, and voices I longed for but would never have been able to find on my own. Today, I'm excited to read to you from Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. Chapter 1. That fool of a fairy Lucinda did not intend to lay a curse on me. She meant to bestow a gift. When I cried inconsolably through my first hour of life, my tears were her inspiration. Shaking her head sympathetically at Mother, the fairy touched my nose. My gift is obedience. Ella shall always be obedient. Now stop crying, child. I stopped. Father was away on a trading expedition as usual, but our cook, Mandy, was there. She and Mother were horrified, but no matter how they explained it to Lucinda, they couldn't make her understand the terrible thing she'd done to me. I could picture the argument, Mandy's freckles standing out sharper than usual, her frizzy gray hair in disarray, and her double chin shaking with anger. Mother, still and intense, her brown curls damp from labor, the laughter gone from her eyes. I couldn't imagine Lucinda. I didn't know what she looked like. She wouldn't undo the curse. My first awareness of it came on my 5th birthday. I seem to remember that day perfectly, perhaps because Mandy told the tale so often. For your birthday, she'd start, I baked a beautiful cake, 6 layers. Bertha, our head maid, had sewn a special gown for me, blue as midnight with a white sash. You were small for your age even then, and you looked like a china doll with a white ribbon in your dark hair and your cheeks red from excitement. In the middle of the table was a vase filled with flowers that Nathan, our manservant, had picked. We all sat around the table. Father was away again. I was thrilled. I had watched Mandy bake the cake and Bertha sew the gown and Nathan pick the flowers. Mandy cut the cake. When she handed me my piece, she said without thinking, "Eat." The first bite was delicious. I finished the slice happily. When it was gone, Mandy cut me another. That one was harder. When it was gone, no one gave me more, but I knew I had to keep eating. I moved my fork into the cake itself. Ella, what are you doing? Mother said. Little piggy, Mandy laughed. It's her birthday, lady. Let her have as much as she wants. She put another slice on my plate. I felt sick, frightened. Why couldn't I stop eating? Swallowing was a struggle. Each bite weighed on my tongue and felt like a sticky mass of glue as I fought to get it down. I started crying while I ate. Mother realized first. Stop eating, Ella, she commanded. I stopped. Anyone could control me with an order. It had to be a direct command such as, put on a shawl or you must go to bed now. A wish or a request had no effect. I was free to ignore, I wish you would put on a shawl or why don't you go to bed now? But against an order, I was powerless. If someone told me to hop on one foot for a day and a half, I'd have to do it. And hopping on one foot wasn't the worst order I could be given. If you commanded me to cut off my own head, I'd have to do it. I was in danger at every moment. As I grew older, I learned to delay my obedience, but each moment cost me dear, in breathlessness, nausea, dizziness, and other complaints. I could never hold out for long. Even a few minutes were a desperate struggle. I had a fairy godmother, and Mother asked her to take the curse away, but my fairy godmother said Lucinda was the only one who could remove it. However, she also said it might be broken someday without Lucinda's help. But I didn't know how. I didn't even know who my fairy godmother was. Instead of making me docile, Lucinda's curse made a rebel of me. Or perhaps I was that way naturally. Mother rarely insisted I do anything. Father knew nothing of the curse and saw me too infrequently to issue many commands. But Mandy was bossy, giving orders as often as she drew breath. Kind orders or for your own good orders. Bundle up, Ella, or hold this bowl while I beat the eggs, Ella. I disliked these commands, harmless as they were. I'd hold the bowl, but move my feet so she would have to follow me around the kitchen. She'd call me Meeks and try to hem me in with more specific instructions, which I would find new ways to evade. Often, it was a long business to get anything done between us, with Mother laughing and egging each of us on by turn. We'd end happily, with me finally choosing to do what Mandy wanted, or with Mandy changing her order to a request. When Mandy would absent-mindedly give me an order I knew she didn't mean, I'd say, "Do I have to?" And she'd reconsider. When I was 8, I had a friend, Pamela, the daughter of one of the servants. One day, she and I were in the kitchen watching Mandy make marchpane. When Mandy sent me to the pantry for more almonds, I returned with only 2. She ordered me back with more exact instructions, which I followed exactly, while still managing to frustrate her true wishes. Later, when Pamela and I retreated to the garden to devour the candy, she asked why I hadn't done what Mandy wanted straight off. "I hate when she's bossy," I answered. Pamela said smugly, "I always obey my elders." "That's because you don't have to." "I do have to, or Father will slap me." "It's not the same for me. I'm under a spell." I enjoyed the importance of the words. Spells were rare. Lucinda was the only fairy rash enough to cast them on people. Like Sleeping Beauty? Except I won't have to sleep for 100 years. "What's your spell?" Pamela asked. I told her. "If anybody gives you an order, you have to obey, including me." I nodded. "Can I try it?" "No." I hadn't anticipated this. I changed the subject. "I'll race you to the gate." "All right, but I command you to lose the race." "Then I don't want to race." "I command you to race, and I command you to lose." We raced. I lost. We picked berries. I had to give Pamela the sweetest, ripest ones. We played princesses and ogres. I had to be the ogre. An hour after my admission, I punched her. She screamed and blood poured from her nose. Our friendship ended that day. Mother found Pamela's mother a new situation far from our town of Frel. After punishing me for using my fist, Mother issued one of her infrequent commands, never to tell anyone about my curse. But I wouldn't have anyway. I had learned caution. When I was almost 15, Mother and I caught cold. Mandy dosed us with her curing soup, made with carrots, leeks, celery, and hair from a unicorn's tail. It was delicious, but we both hated to see those young yellow-white hairs floating around the vegetables. Since Father was away from Frel, we drank the soup sitting up in Mother's bed. If he had been home, I wouldn't have been in her room at all. He didn't like me to be anywhere near him, getting underfoot, as he said. I sipped my soup with the hairs in it because Mandy said I had to, even though I grimaced at the soup and at Mandy's retreating back. I'll wait for mine to cool, Mother said. Then, after Mandy left, she took the hairs out while she ate and put them back in the empty bowl when she was done. The next day, I was well, and Mother was much worse, too sick to drink or eat anything. She said there was a knife in her throat and a battering ram at her head. To make her feel better, I put cool cloths in her forehead and told her stories. They were only old, familiar tales about the fairies that I changed here and there, but sometimes I made Mother laugh, except the laugh turned into a cough. Before Mandy sent me off for the night, Mother kissed me. Good night. I love you, precious. They were her last words to me. As I left the room, I heard her last words to Mandy. I'm not very sick. Don't send for Sir Peter. Sir Peter was father. The next morning, she was awake but dreaming. With wide open eyes, she chattered to invisible courtiers and plucked nervously at her silver necklace. To Mandy and me, there in the room with her, she said nothing. Nathan, the manservant, got the physician who hurried me away from Mother's side. Our hallway was empty. I followed it to the spiral staircase and walked down, remembering the times Mother and I had slid down the banister. We didn't do it when people were around. We have to be dignified, she would whisper then, stepping down the stairs in an especially stately way. And I would follow, mimicking her and fighting my natural clumsiness, pleased to be part of her game. But when we were alone, we preferred to slide and yell all the way down and run back up for another ride, and a third and a fourth. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I pulled our heavy front door open and slipped out into the bright sunshine. It was a long walk to the old castle, but I wanted to make a wish, and I wanted to make it in the place where it would have the best chance of being granted. The castle had been abandoned when King Gerald was a boy, although it was reopened on special occasions for private balls, weddings, and the like. Even so, Bertha said it was haunted, and Nathan said it was infested with mice. Its gardens were overgrown, but Bertha swore the candle trees had power. I went straight to the candle grove. The candles were small trees that had been pruned and tied to wires to make them grow in the shape of a candelabra. For wishes, you need a trading material. So I closed my eyes and thought. If Mother gets well quick, I'll be good, not just obedient. I'll try harder not to be clumsy, and I won't tease Mandy so much. I didn't bargain for Mother's life because I didn't believe she was in danger of dying. From Chapter 2. Everyone called it losing Mother, but she wasn't lost. She was gone, and no matter where I went, another town, another country, fairyland, or gnome caverns, I wouldn't find her. We would never talk again, or laugh together, or swim in the river Locarno, or slide down the banister, or play tricks on Bertha, or a million things. I cried myself out and sat up. My gown had changed in front from black silk to brown dirt. As Mandy would have said, I was a spectacle. How much time had gone by? I had to go back. Father had told me to, and the curse was tugging at me to obey. Outside the privacy of my tree, Prince Charmant stood reading a tombstone. I had never been so near him before. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angelina Randazzo, and I've been volunteering at the library for the past 4 years. My freshman year at Ithaca College, I did a special program where I got to move in early and I got to volunteer throughout the community, and I was placed at the library. And then I was cleaning books and I was experimenting with the then new robots. And I just had so much fun, and it was just such a wonderful place that I knew right away that I wanted to keep working in that community and keep helping at the library. I volunteered in like almost every position there, including volunteering at past readathons as the person who checks you in or who writes on the whiteboard with the fun little fonts and the designs. And I've even filled in for a couple no-shows, doing some impromptu readings. But this will be my first time doing an official reader, and so I'm very excited. Today I will be reading from Kelly Barnhill's The Girl Who Drank the Moon. My copy doesn't have the beautiful cover, so I wanted to share it with you. And it's a really beautiful tale. It's a fairy tale. It won the Newbery in 2017. It's about a fairy tale town that has corrupt leaders and a dark tradition, and how everything changes when a witch accidentally feeds a baby some moonlight or pure magic. And it's really about the power of stories and how those in power can use stories, and also how those without power can use stories. And at its heart, it's about curiosity and love. And I just really love it. So let's just jump right in. Chapter 1, in which a story is told. Yes, there is a witch in the woods. There has always been a witch. Will you stop fidgeting for once? My stars, I have never seen such a fidgety child. No, sweetheart, I have not seen her. No one has. Not for ages. We've taken steps so that we will never see her. Terrible steps. Don't make me say it. You already know anyway. Oh, I don't know, darling. No one knows why she wants children. We don't know why she insists that it must always be the very youngest among us. It's not as though we could just ask her. She hasn't been seen. We made sure that she will not be seen. Of course she exists. What a question. Look at the woods. So dangerous. Poisonous smoke and sinkholes and boiling geysers and terrible dangers every which way. Do you think it is so by accident? Rubbish. It was the witch. And if we don't do as she says, what will become of us? You really need me to explain it? I'd rather not. Oh, hush now, don't cry. It's not as though the Council of Elders is coming for you now, is it? You're far too old. From our family? Yes, dearest, ever so long ago, before you were born. He was a beautiful boy. Now, finish your supper and see to your chores. We'll all be up early tomorrow. The day of sacrifice waits for no one, and we must all be present to thank the child who will save us for one more year. Your brother? How could I fight for him? If I had, the witch would have killed us all, and then where would we be? Sacrifice one or sacrifice all. That is the way of the world. You couldn't change it if we tried. Enough questions. Off with you. Fool child. Chapter 2, in which an unfortunate woman goes quite mad. Grand Elder Garland took his time that morning. The day of sacrifice only came once a year, after all. And he liked to look his best during the sober procession to the cursed house and during the somber retreat. He encouraged the other elders to do the same. It was important to give the populace a show. He carefully dabbed rouge on his sagging cheeks and lined his eyes with thick streaks of coal. He checked his teeth in the mirror, ensuring they were free of debris or goop. He loved that mirror. It was the only one in the protectorate. Nothing gave Garland more pleasure than the position of a thing that was unique to him. He liked being special. The Grand Elder had ever so many possessions that were unique to in the protectorate. It was one of the perks of the job. The protectorate, called the Cattail Kingdom by some and the City of Sorrows by others, was sandwiched between a treacherous forest on one side and an enormous bog on the other. Most people in the protectorate drew their livelihoods from the bog. There was a future in bog walking, mothers told their children. Not much of a future, you understand, but it was better than nothing. The bog was full of zerin shoots in the spring, and zerin flowers in the summer, and zerin bulbs in the fall. In addition to a wide array of medical and borderline magical plants that could be harvested, prepared, treated, and sold to the traders from the other side of the forest, who in turn transported the fruits of the bog to the free cities, far away. The forest itself was terribly dangerous and navigable only by the road, and the elders owned the road. Which is to say that Grand Elder Garland owned the road, and the other elders had their cut. The elders owned the bog, too, and the orchards, and the houses, and the market squares, even the garden plots. This was why the families of the Protectorate made their shoes out of reeds. This was why in lean times they fed their children the thick, rich broth of the bog, hoping that the bog would make them strong. This is why the elders and their families grew big and strong and rosy-cheeked on beef and butter and beer. The door knocked. "Enter," Grand Elder Garland mumbled as he adjusted the drape of his robe. It was Antane, his nephew, an elder in training, but only because Garland, in a moment of weakness, had promised the ridiculous boy's more ridiculous mother. But that was unkind. Antane was a nice enough young man, nearly 13. He was a hard worker and a quick study. He was good with numbers and clever with his hands and could build a comfortable bench for a tired elder as quick as breathing. And despite himself, Garland had developed an inexplicable and growing fondness for the boy. But Antane had big ideas, grand notions, and questions. Garland furrowed his brow. Antane was, how could he put it, overly keen? If this kept up, he'd have to be dealt with, blood or no. The thought of it weighed upon Garland's heart like a stone. "Uncle Garland!" Antane nearly bowled his uncle over with his insufferable enthusiasm. "Calm yourself, boy," the elder snapped. "This is a solemn occasion." The boy calmed visibly, his eager, dog-like face tilted towards the ground. Garland resisted the urge to pat him gently on the head. "I have been sent," Antane continued, in a mostly soft voice, "to tell you that the other elders are ready, and all the populace waits along the route. Everyone is accounted for." "Each one? There are no shirkers?" "After last year, I don't think there ever will be again," Antane said with a shudder. "Pity." Garland checked his mirror again, touching up his robe. He rather enjoyed teaching the occasional lesson to the citizens of the Protectorate. It clarified things. He tapped the sagging folds under his chin and frowned. "Well, nephew," he said with an artful swish of his robes, one that had taken him over a decade to perfect, "let us be off. That baby isn't going to sacrifice itself after all." And he flowed into the street with Antane stumbling at his heels. Normally, the day of sacrifice came and went with all the pomp and gravity that it ought. The children were given over without protest. Their numb families mourned in silence, with pots of stew and nourishing food heaped into their kitchens, while the comforting arms of neighbors circled around them to ease their bereavement. Normally, no one broke the rules, but not this time. Grand Elder Garland pressed his lips into a frown. He could hear the mothers howling before the procession turned onto the final street. The citizens began to shift uncomfortably where they stood. When they arrived at the family's house, an astonishing sight met the Council of Elders. A man with a scratched-up face and a swollen lower lip, and bloody bald spots across his skull where his hair had been torn out in clumps, met them at the door. He tried to smile, but his tongue went instinctively to the gap where a tooth had just recently been. He sucked in his lips and attempted to bow instead. "I'm sorry, sir," said the man, the father, presumably. "I don't know what has gotten into her. It's like she's gone mad." From the rafters above them, a woman screeched and howled as the elders entered the house. Her shiny black hair flew about her head like a nest of long, writhing snakes. She hissed and spat like a cornered animal. She clung to the ceiling beams with one arm and one leg, while holding a baby tightly against her breast with the other arm. "Get out!" she screamed. "You cannot have her. I spit on your faces and curse your names. Leave my home at once, or I shall tear out your eyes and throw them to the crows." The elders stared at her, open-mouthed. They couldn't believe it. No one fought for a doomed child. It simply wasn't done. Antane alone began to cry. He did his best to hide it from the adults in the room. Garland, thinking fast, affixed a kindly expression on his craggy face. He turned his palms toward the mother to show her that he meant no harm. He gritted his teeth behind his smile. All this kindness was nearly killing him. We are not taking her at all, my poor misguided girl, Gerlin said in his most patient voice. The witch is taking her. We are simply doing as we're told. The mother made a guttural sound deep in her chest, like an angry bear. Gerlin laid his hands on the shoulder of the perplexed husband and gave a gentle squeeze. It appears, my good fellow, that you are right. Your wife has gone mad. He did his best to cover his rage with a facade of concern. A rare case, of course, but not without precedent. We must respond with compassion. She needs care, not blame. Liar, the woman spat. The child began to cry, and the woman climbed even higher, putting each foot on a parallel rafter and bracing her back against the slope of the roof, trying to position herself in such a way that she could remain out of reach while she nursed the baby. The child calmed instantly. If you take her, she said with a growl, I will find her. I will find her and take her back. You see if I won't. And face the witch, Gerland laughed. All on your own. Oh, you pathetic, lost soul. His voice was honey, but his face was a glowing ember. Grief has made you lose your senses. The shock has shattered your poor mind. No matter, we shall heal you, dear, as best we can. Guards! He snapped his fingers, and the armed guards poured into the room. They were a special unit, provided as always by the Sisters of the Star. They wore bows and arrows slung across their backs and shorts, sharp swords sheathed at their belts, their long braided hair looped around their waists where it was cinched tight, a testament to their years of contemplation and combat training at the top of the tower. Their faces were implacable as stones, and the elders, despite their power and stature, edged away from them. The sisters were a frightening force, not to be trifled with. Remove the child from the lunatic's clutches and escort the poor dear to the tower, Gerland ordered. He glared at the mother in the rafters, who had suddenly gone very pale. The Sisters of the Star know what to do with broken minds, my dear. I'm sure it hardly hurts at all. The guard was efficient, calm, and utterly ruthless. The mother didn't stand a chance. Within moments she was bound, hobbled, and carried away. Her howls echoed through the silent town, ending suddenly with the tower's great wooden doors slammed shut, locking her inside. The baby, on the other hand, once transferred into the arms of the Grand Elder, whimpered briefly and then turned her attention to the stacking face in front of her, all wobbles and creases and folds. She had a solemn look to her, calm, skeptical, and intense, making it difficult for Gerland to look away. She had black curls and black eyes, luminous skin like polished amber. In the center of her forehead, she had a birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. The mother had a similar mark. Common lore insisted that such people were special. Gerland disliked lore as a general rule, and he certainly disliked it when citizens of the Protectorate got it in their heads to think themselves better than they were. He deepened his frown and leaned close, wrinkling his brow. The baby stuck out her tongue. Horrible child, Gerland thought. Gentlemen, he said with all the ceremony he could muster, it is time. The baby chose this particular moment to let loose a large, warm, wet stain across the front of Gerland's robes. He pretended not to notice, but inwardly he fumed. She had done it on purpose. He was sure of it. What a revolting baby. The procession was, as usual, somber, slow, and insufferably plodding. Gerland felt he might go mad with impatience. Once the Protectorate's gates closed behind them, though, and the citizens returned with their melancholy broods of children to their dark little homes, the elders quickened their pace. But why are we running, Uncle? Antane asked. Hush, boy, Gerland hissed, and keep up. No one liked being in the forest, away from the road. Not even the elders, not even Gerland. The area just outside the Protectorate walls was safe enough, in theory. But everyone knew someone who had accidentally wandered too far and fell into a sinkhole, or stepped in a mud pot, boiling off most of their skin, or wandered into a swale where the air was bad and never returned. The forest was dangerous. They followed a winding trail to the small hollow surrounded by 5 ancient trees known as the witches' handmaidens. Or 6. Didn't it used to be 5? Gerland glared at the trees, counted them again, and shook his head. There were 6. No matter. The forest was just getting to him. Those trees were almost as old as the world, after all. The space inside the ring of trees was mossy and soft, and the elders laid the child upon it, doing their best not to look at her. They had turned their backs on the baby and started to hurry away when the youngest member cleared his throat. So we just leave her here? Antane asked. That's how it's done? Yes, nephew, Ghrelin said. That is how it's done. He felt a sudden wave of fatigue settling on his shoulders like an ox's yoke. He felt his spine start to sag. Antane pinched his neck, a nervous habit that he couldn't break. Shouldn't we wait for the witch to arrive? The other elders fell into an uncomfortable silence. Come again? Elder Raspin, the most decrepit of the elders, asked. Well, surely, Antane's voice trailed off. Surely we must wait for the witch, he said quietly. What would become of us if wild animals came first and carried her off? The other elders stared at the grand elder, their lips tight. Fortunately, nephew, he said quickly, leading the boy away, that has never been a problem. But, Antane said, pinching his neck again, so hard he left a mark. But nothing, Ghrelin said, a firm hand on the boy's back, striding quickly down the well-trodden path. And one by one, the elders filed out, leaving the baby behind. They left knowing, all but Antane, that it was not a matter of if the child were eaten by animals, but rather that she surely would be. They left her knowing that there surely wasn't a witch. There had never been a witch. There was only a dangerous forest and a single road and a thin grip on a life that the elders had enjoyed for generations. The witch, that is, the belief in her, made for a frightened people, a subdued people, a compliant people who lived their lives in a saddened haze, the clouds of their grief numbing their senses and dampening their minds. It was terribly convenient for the elders' unencumbered rule. Unpleasant, too, of course, but that couldn't be helped. They heard the child whimper as they trampled through the trees, but the whimpering soon gave way to the swamp sighs and birdsong and the woody creaking of trees throughout the forest, and each elder felt as sure could be that the child wouldn't live to see the morning, and that they would never see her, never hear her, never think of her again. They thought she was gone forever. They were wrong, of course. And that is the first 2 chapters of The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I highly recommend you continue reading to see what happens to this baby and what magical things are going on in this world. This is really awesome to read for all of you, and I hope you all donate to the library. It's a really wonderful place. Enjoy the rest of the fundraiser.